This article is a summary of work that's been done over the last 10 years on something called Mendel's account. Mendel's accountant is a system that was devised by John Sanford and others in the creation movement to meticulously and rigorously look at what would happen in biology if we took things in terms of mutations and natural selection from the data that we now have and extrapolated from that data what would actually be the outcomes. And to do this in a way which had not been done previously. And obviously, with the advances in biology, we now have data that we didn't have in the past. And it's interesting, Carter, who wrote this particular article, likens it to the article that the research done by the RATE project, which was an attempt in the early part of the century, around about 2000, to show that radiometric dating and other such methods did not necessarily produce long ages for rocks, but actually many of the things there produced a young ages for rocks. And that was a significant investment of time and energy by the creation science movement to undermine what was at the time one of the most effective arguments for an old Earth, which is radiometric dating. And the book that came out of that is Thousands, Not Billions, and well worth reading that book to understand what the creation scientists came up with. Anyway, with regard to Mendel's accountant, which Carter thinks is of an equivalent stature, this argues that basically the rate of decay in the genetic code is such, and the capacity for natural selection is so limited to stop it, that, as with the rocks, we can confidently assert that the genetic code can only be thousands of years old. And so we now have two pieces of major research done by creation societies which show that the rocks can only be thousands of years old and the genetic code can only be thousands of years old, thus confirming the biblical narrative. And that's why Carter thinks this is such an important piece of work. Interestingly, though, if you were to go onto the internet, you would see lots of people railing against Mendel's accountant. There are no peer-reviewed papers that have been generated showing that Mendel's accountant is false. And the people who are running this particular program are fully qualified to do so and have published papers from the research and from the work that they've got. And so this lack of academic critiquing of Mendel's accountant and also genetic entropy is almost certainly because the academic world has no arguments that are scientifically valid against these two approaches, genetic entropy and Mendel's accountant, which speaks volumes to the significance of this, because genetic entropy and Mendel's accountant, as I said, show that the genetic code is only thousands of years old. And if there is no academically rigorous objection to those things, and I can't see where they could come from because they are pretty obvious. You know, mutations destroys information, it doesn't create it, and the rate of mutations is so high that millions of years of mutations would destroy the genetic code. If there is no academic response against this, then this should be considered a significant argument for a recent creation and should mean that evolution should be rejected as a valid scientific theory. Would that people would take note of these things, because millions, potentially billions of people are going to a lost eternity needlessly because they have been persuaded and their cultures, which they live and breathe as it were, have been persuaded that there is no God on the basis of evolution. And that's why this is incredibly serious. Well, thank you for listening.